A medical examiner is the one person in the justice system who speaks for the dead. So what happens when that person lies? For over a decade, one county's chief medical examiner signed off on autopsies he never performed, invented causes of death he never confirmed, and handed prosecutors exactly what they needed to convict. 5 men, 5 separate trials, 5 guilty verdicts, all built on autopsy reports that were complete fabrications. By the time anyone thought to question his work, those 5 men had already lost a combined 63 years behind bars for deaths that may not have even been murders. He never even picked up the scalpel. This story takes place in a county where everyone knew everyone, where the justice system ran on trust more than scrutiny, where underfunding was chronic and oversight was minimal, and at the center of that system was the county's chief medical examiner. He'd held the position for over 15 years. He had testified in hundreds of criminal trials. His autopsy reports had been used as evidence in countless convictions. And in all those years, across all those cases, not once, not one single time, had his work been seriously challenged. His signature meant certainty. His word meant truth. In a county where the morgue was understaffed and the caseload was crushing, he was the only one who could tell the living what the dead couldn't say for themselves. And everyone believed him. The first case started with a death that looked suspicious. A woman was found dead in her home on a Tuesday morning. No obvious cause, no clear explanation. Her husband had been the one to find her. His name doesn't matter for this story. We'll call him R. R was a factory worker, 3rd shift. He'd come home from work that morning to find his wife unresponsive in their bedroom. The paramedics couldn't revive her, and the circumstances, combined with neighborhood rumors about arguments, made the police suspicious. R insisted he'd come straight home from work. He didn't know what happened. He'd been at the factory all night. Dozens of coworkers could verify, but the investigation hinged on one question: how did she die? And the only person who could answer that was the medical examiner. 3 days later, his report arrived. 12 pages long, detailed observations, measurements, diagrams, tissue sample references. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to head and torso. Manner of death: homicide. The report described specific bruise patterns consistent with assault, internal bleeding from repeated blows, a time of death window that perfectly overlapped with when R was home. To the prosecutor, it was exactly what they needed. It looked like science. It felt like certainty. The trial was straightforward. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on the medical examiner's findings. Physical evidence? Minimal. Eyewitnesses? None. Confession? No. But they had the medical examiner. He walked the jury through his findings, explained the injuries in clear, confident language, described how the bruise patterns indicated assault, not a fall or accident, testified that in his professional opinion, based on over 15 years of experience, this was unquestionably a homicide. The defense attorney tried. He objected that there had been no independent review of the autopsy, no second opinion from another pathologist, no verification of the findings. The judge overruled. He's the county's chief medical examiner. His credentials speak for themselves. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. Guilty. R was sentenced to 25 years to life. He'd been married for 7 years. His wife was dead, and now he would spend the next quarter century in prison for killing her. Over the next several years, 4 more cases followed a remarkably similar pattern. Different deaths, different circumstances, different accused men. But the autopsy reports all shared certain characteristics: the same confident tone, the same formatting, the same decisive conclusions delivered with scientific certainty. In case after case, those reports arrived on the prosecutor's desk like clockwork. Clean, definitive, unquestioned. No one asked questions. Why would they? He was the county's chief medical examiner, and his signature meant the truth. 5 cases, 5 convictions, and one man's signature on every single autopsy report. No one thought to ask, did he actually perform them? 5 men entered the prison system based on that medical examiner's reports. Let's meet them. Man 1, R, the worker. 12 years in, he'd missed his daughter's entire childhood. Her middle school graduation, her high school prom, her college acceptance. She stopped visiting at year 6. Stopped believing him at year 8. His parents both died while he was inside. He filed appeals every year. Every year denied. Man 2, M, the coach. M had been convicted of killing a neighbor in a property dispute. The medical examiner ruled blunt force trauma from assault. M insisted the neighbor had fallen downstairs during an argument, that he tried to help. Called 911 immediately. 14 years. His little league team had held a candlelight vigil the night of his sentencing. Some of those kids still wrote to him. They were adults now. Man 3, D, the student. D was convicted of killing his college roommate. The medical examiner ruled strangulation. D said his roommate had a seizure disorder, that he'd found him unresponsive and called for help, that he'd tried CPR. 8 years. He'd lost his full academic scholarship, his future, his entire 20s. Man 4, T, the business owner. T was convicted of poisoning his business partner. The medical examiner ruled arsenic exposure based on alleged tissue samples. T maintained his partner had a chronic illness, that the doctors had warned them the prognosis was poor. 15 years. His business was liquidated. His family lost their home. His wife worked 3 jobs to keep the family together. Man 5, L, the veteran. L was convicted of killing a fellow veteran in a halfway house altercation. The medical examiner ruled internal bleeding from assault. L said the man had collapsed, that he had pre-existing injuries from service, that L had held him and called for help. 14 years. The VA abandoned his case. 5 different men, 5 different stories, 5 different lives destroyed. But every conviction rested on the same foundation: one man's autopsy report. And not one of those reports had ever been independently verified. Here's what no one was paying attention to. The county medical examiner's office was handling 3 times the recommended caseload, 1 autopsy suite, 1 table, 1 medical examiner for an entire county's deaths. Natural, accidental, suspicious, criminal, all of them. And in some years, the numbers didn't make sense. 2012, 237 autopsies signed, 260 working days in the year. Average autopsy time, 2 to 4 hours. To perform 237 thorough autopsies in 260 working days, the medical examiner would have to complete nearly 1 every single working day. No sick days, no vacation, no conferences, no testimony in court. But he testified in court regularly. He attended conferences out of state. He took vacation. The math didn't work, but no one was doing the math. And then 12 years into this pattern, someone finally noticed. Her name doesn't matter. She was a courthouse reporter for the county newspaper. She'd been covering criminal trials for 8 years, and she'd seen the medical examiner testify dozens of times. One night, reviewing her notes from 2 recent murder trials, she noticed something odd. The medical examiner's testimony in both cases included nearly identical phrasing, not similar, identical, word for word. She pulled more reports from public records, different cases, different victims, different circumstances, and she found entire paragraphs repeated across unrelated cases. In one case, the report described injuries to a victim's left arm in specific medical detail. That victim's left arm had been amputated 3 years before death. It was impossible if the medical examiner had actually looked at the body. She started cross-referencing. The medical examiner's billing records. The county paid him per autopsy performed. His conference attendance, logged in official records. And she found something damning. He had billed the county for autopsies performed on days when he was documented as being at conferences in other states. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't a lawyer. She was a reporter with a highlighter and a calendar. And that was enough to see what the entire justice system had missed. She published her story. Small local paper. Circulation, maybe 8,000. Almost no one read it. The prosecutor's office declined to comment. The medical examiner's attorney threatened a defamation lawsuit. She contacted defense attorneys from the 5 original cases. Most had moved on. One remembered. "I raised concerns about the autopsy report during trial. The judge told me I was wasting the court's time." The truth was finally in print, but in a county that trusted its medical examiner more than its newspaper. The truth wasn't enough. 237 autopsies in 1 year. Identical paragraphs copied across unrelated cases. A journalist with a highlighter was the first person in a decade to notice. But that small article didn't die. A reporter at the state's largest newspaper saw it, thought it was worth following up, called the original journalist, got her notes, started making calls, and a state senator happened to read about it on a Sunday morning. And he made one phone call to the state attorney general's office. That's how accountability works in America. Accidentally, within 2 weeks, the state ordered an independent review of the medical examiner's cases. A forensic pathologist from the state university was brought in to review the medical examiner's work. She was given access to all case files, all autopsy reports, all physical evidence that still existed. What she found was devastating. Finding 1, procedures never performed. The reports describe procedures in detail, tissue samples collected and analyzed, microscope slides prepared and examined. But when investigators checked the evidence storage, the samples didn't exist. The slides were never made. In one case, the report described analyzing 47 different tissue samples. Not a single sample could be located. These procedures, she wrote, were never performed. Finding 2, fabricated causes of death. In at least 3 of the 5 cases, the injuries described in the autopsy reports didn't match the physical evidence. Hospital records from before death showed different injuries. X-rays contradicted the report's descriptions. In R's case, the first conviction, the medical examiner had described extensive blunt force trauma, but the independent pathologist reviewing the actual medical records and photographs found no evidence of trauma. The woman had died of sudden cardiac arrest, a heart condition, natural causes. There had been no murder. In another case, strangulation had been ruled, but the neck injuries described in the report didn't exist in the photographs. Finding 3, copy-paste fraud. Then she found the copy-paste fraud. Entire sections of reports, observations, measurements, conclusions had been copied verbatim from case to case, including the case where a victim with an amputated left arm had injuries to that non-existent arm described in medical detail. On-screen text appearing systematically. Tissue samples referenced, never collected. Slides described, do not exist. Procedures documented, never performed. Causes of death, fabricated. Her conclusion was clear. This was not negligence. This was not administrative error. This was systematic fabrication of evidence. Every autopsy report reviewed contained material false statements. None of the autopsies described in these reports were actually performed. He wasn't just cutting corners. He was manufacturing evidence, and every page he signed sent someone to prison. The medical examiner was called before a state medical review board. His defense was predictable. Overwhelming caseload, clerical errors, staff shortages. The independent pathologist responded directly. Administrative oversight does not explain fabricated tissue samples. Staff shortage does not explain copied paragraphs describing non-existent injuries. This is systematic fraud. And then investigators found something else. The medical examiner had been billing the county for full autopsies. Premium rates, $1,200 to $1,800 per autopsy, depending on complexity. Over 12 years, he had billed for over 2,400 autopsies. He had collected approximately $3.2 million from the county for work he never did. He wasn't just lazy, he was profiting from fraud. His medical license was immediately suspended. A criminal investigation was opened. Based on the independent review, motions to vacate the convictions were filed in all 5 cases. One by one, the convictions were reviewed. Man 3, D, released. The roommate's medical records confirmed a severe seizure disorder, multiple hospitalizations, doctors' warnings about sudden death risk. The medical examiner's report had fabricated strangulation evidence. The conviction was vacated. After 8 years, D walked free. Man 5, L, released. The fellow veteran's VA medical records showed extensive pre-existing internal injuries from combat service. The medical examiner's report had invented new trauma, claimed assault injuries that were actually service-related. Conviction vacated. After 14 years, L walked free. Man 2, M, released. An independent review of the original scene photographs and the victim's body position confirmed injuries entirely consistent with a fall down stairs. Not assault. The medical examiner had described a beating that never occurred. Conviction vacated. After 14 years, M walked free. Man 4, T, released. The prosecution had preserved some tissue samples from the alleged poisoning victim. An independent lab tested them. No arsenic, no poison. The medical examiner had fabricated toxicology results. Conviction vacated. After 15 years, T walked free. Man 1, R, released. The independent pathologist reviewed every piece of evidence from R's wife's death. Hospital records, photos, medical history. She had an undiagnosed heart condition, a congenital defect that could cause sudden cardiac arrest. There was no blunt force trauma. There were no assault injuries. Cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest, natural causes. Manner of death, natural. No evidence of homicide. The medical examiner had written homicide on a piece of paper, and no one had checked. The conviction was vacated. After 12 years, R walked free. His wife wasn't murdered. She died of a heart condition no one diagnosed. He spent 12 years in prison for a crime that never happened. Because one man wrote homicide without ever picking up a scalpel. One man's wife died of a heart condition. He spent 12 years in prison for her murder. Because the medical examiner wrote homicide without ever examining the body. The 5 exonerations happened over 6 months. 5 different men, 5 different prisons, 5 different release days. No celebration shots, no crowds cheering, no lawyers hugging them on the steps. Just men blinking in sunlight, holding plastic bags with their belongings, stepping onto sidewalks. Some had family waiting, some didn't. All of them stepped into a world that had moved on without them. Exoneration is not freedom. It's a door opening into a world that doesn't know what to do with you. Ear returned to his old neighborhood. His house had been sold years ago. Foreclosure, his wife's medical bills, legal fees. His daughter agreed to meet him for coffee. She was 24 now. She had a child he'd never met. He sat on a park bench near his old street, watching people live lives he'd been erased from. M went back to the field where he used to coach. It had been paved over for a parking lot. One of his old players recognized him in town. The kid was 28 now, married, had a job at the post office. They hugged, but the years sat between them like a wall. D was 30 years old. His college classmates had careers, families, homes. He lived with his parents, had a GED he earned in prison, and a record that still showed up on background checks even though the conviction was vacated. T went to where his business used to be. A different company occupied the space. His credit was destroyed, his savings gone. He lived with a cousin. L tried to get support from the VA. They acknowledged his case, but there was no expedited help for wrongfully convicted veterans. He slept in a veterans shelter for the first 3 months. 63 combined years. 5 men. Lives that can't be put back together. No amount of money can calculate what was taken. Not just the years, the versions of themselves they were supposed to become. Compensation hearings were held. Sterile rooms, legal language, bureaucratic delays. The county offered settlements, with non-disclosure agreements attached. Some signed. They needed the money, others refused. They wanted accountability more than cash. The prosecutor who had convicted them, now retired, released a statement. We relied on the expertise available at the time. The medical examiner's credentials were beyond reproach. We acted in good faith. No apology, no acknowledgement of the 63 years stolen. Just, we relied on the expert. The medical examiner faced criminal charges, fraud, perjury, official misconduct. His trial was delayed, then delayed again, then delayed a third time. The medical examiner, license revoked, criminal charges pending, conviction none, prison time served 0 days. The 5 men served a combined 63 years. The man who put them there has yet to serve a single day. The journalist who broke the story won a regional press award. She keeps a photo of the 5 men on her desk. This isn't an isolated case. Medical examiner offices across the United States are chronically underfunded, dangerously understaffed, and operate with minimal oversight. 20% of U.S. counties lack an accredited medical examiner's office. Average caseload, 250 cases per year. Recommended maximum, 250 cases per year. Many MEs handle 400+ cases per year. In the last decade alone, autopsy fraud or misconduct has been exposed in multiple states. Medical examiner falsified hundreds of reports. County me performed autopsies while intoxicated. Forensic pathologists' work questioned in 1,200 cases. We trust the medical examiner because we have to. Because when someone dies and the cause isn't obvious, that one person with a scalpel and a signature decides whether it was an accident or a murder, whether someone goes home or goes to prison. We assume they do the work. We assume they tell the truth. But assumptions aren't autopsies, and signatures aren't science. 5 men lost 63 years because one man signed his name to lies, and everyone believed him because no one asked the question that should have been asked from the beginning. Did you actually do the work? 5 men, 63 years stolen, 0 autopsies actually performed. Pause. The medical examiner has not been convicted of any crime. This story is fictionalized, but the systemic issues are real. Medical examiner misconduct has been documented in multiple states. Oversight remains minimal. Caseloads remain crushing. And the assumption that the expert tells the truth still sends innocent people to prison. Subscribe for more investigations into forensic fraud, wrongful convictions, and systemic failures in criminal justice. When was the last time you questioned an expert?